Welcome to another edition of Whoniverse Database. Let's see what topic we'll be covering today. Aha! This time it's what I guess you could call the main overarching force of the 11th Doctor's era. The Papal Mainframe, along with the creatures known as the Silence and the Kovarian chapter led by the eponymous Madame Kovarian. Firstly, the Papal Mainframe. What is it? Well, the Papal Mainframe was a futuristic space church, which later became the Church of the Silence during the Siege of Trenzalore. The church was led by a female humanoid named Tasha Lem, and being as big as it was, had its own military force and weapons. One of the Papal Mainframe's customs was that visitors should arrive with no clothing, although holographic clothes were acceptable, but church employees were trained to see through these. The Mainframe was also apparently in charge of the Headless Monks, another religious order. One of the church's most notable features was the use of memory-proof confessional priests, better known as the Silence, creatures who were forgotten by anyone who broke line of sight with them. They were genetically engineered by the Mainframe so people could confess sins without remembering doing so. When the Time Lords began transmitting a signal through the cracks in time from the planet Trenzalore, countless different species flocked to see what was going on. The Papal Mainframe was the first ship to arrive, so Tasha Lem contacted the Doctor, who, along with Clara, was sent down to the planet to investigate. After finding out about the Time Lords and the Time Crack, it was discovered that the Doctor's real name would act as a code word, and when spoken through the crack, the Time Lords would take this as a cue that it was safe for them to return from their pocket dimension. Tasha and the Church believed the return of the Time Lords would spark a second Time War, and so tried to prevent the Doctor from speaking his name. What followed was an uneasy alliance in which the Doctor refused to leave Trenzalore as it would almost certainly be destroyed along with its inhabitants, and Tasha was determined to make sure the Doctor didn't speak his name and bring back his people. This led to the Siege of Trenzalore, where all the different species gathered in orbit attempted to breach the planet's defences and get to the Time Lords, while the Doctor and the Church fended them off. This is when the Church of the Papal Mainframe changed to the Church of the Silence, with the goal of keeping the Doctor silent on the matter of his name, the origin of the phrase "silence will fall." The Doctor, having tricked Clara into returning home in the TARDIS, spent the next 300 years defending the town of Christmas from many of his enemies. It was during this time that the Kovarian chapter formed and broke away from the main church. We'll come back to them. After Clara returned with the TARDIS, she and the Doctor returned to the Papal Mainframe to meet with Tasha. As it turned out, the Mainframe had been overrun by the Daleks, who had taken over the church and turned its personnel into Dalek puppets, including Tasha Lem. The Doctor, Clara and Tasha managed to take back control of the Mainframe ship, at least briefly, and the Doctor went back to Trenzalore, once again sending Clara away and spending a further 600 years or so defending the town. By the end of the siege, the Doctor had allied himself with the Silence and the remaining church soldiers. By now, only the Daleks continued to attack, as all other life forms had given up and retreated. Out of regenerations and with no plan, the Doctor has one last meeting with Clara, brought back to Trenzalore by Tasha, before facing the huge Dalek ship overhead. As he's about to die, Clara speaks to the Time Lords through the crack and convinces them to save the Doctor, preventing the future where his grave is on Trenzalore seen in the name of the Doctor. The Time Lords grant the Doctor a new cycle of regenerations, which they send through another crack that opens up in the sky. Using this new burst of regeneration energy, the Doctor destroys the Daleks and hurries back to his TARDIS, where he takes off and regenerates in front of Clara. What happened to Tasha and the Church of the Silence after this is unknown. From the Doctor's perspective, however, he was dealing with consequences of the Trenzalore siege before he even reached that planet. As previously mentioned, the Kovarian chapter were a splinter group that decided, instead of carrying on with the Church's plans to help the Doctor defend Trenzalore, they would travel back in the Doctor's timeline and try to prevent him from ever reaching the planet in the first place. Madame Kovarian, along with some of the Silence, first attempted to blow up the TARDIS, which failed when the Doctor rebooted the universe with the second Big Bang. Ironically, this is what created the cracks in time in the first place, the very thing that led to the Siege of Trenzalore. Next, they kidnapped Amy and Rory's child and raised her to be a psychopath to kill the Doctor. The child would later grow up to be River Song. This attempt also failed as the Doctor secretly survived his death at Lake Silencio, which was supposed to be a fixed point in time, but not before an alternate timeline was created where River sabotaged her weapons to let the Doctor live. In this alternate reality, all of time was happening at once and the universe was falling apart. Well, that is until the timeline was aborted by the Doctor faking his death at Lake Silencio. This meant that the Doctor eventually did reach Trenzalore and initiate the siege after all. From here on out, the Silence's involvement in these events is over, but Madame Kovarian wasn't done with the Doctor just yet. While she was presumably killed in the aborted timeline, Kovarian lived on once time had been fixed. As it turned out, Kovarian had also used River's part-Time Lord DNA to create several other proto-Time Lords like her. One such proto-Time Lord known as Brooke was sent on a mission by Madame Kovarian to kill the Doctor in his 5th incarnation. Brooke ended up travelling with the Doctor while trying to complete her mission, similar to Turlough when he was employed by the Black Guardian to kill the 5th Doctor. Despite River's intervention, Brooke and Kovarian were successful in their attempt and killed the 5th Doctor. However, Brooke later travelled back in time and prevented the Doctor's death once again. River and the other Proto-Time Lords then captured and imprisoned Madame Kovarian, and as far as we know, that's where she's been ever since. And there you go, that was the video all about what is basically the overarching plot of the Matt Smith era. This one is very timey-wimey in true Stephen Moffat fashion, and it's very difficult to wrap your head around, but hopefully a combination of my experience with Series 5, 6 and 7 and information from the Doctor Who wiki has managed to give a decent rundown of those events and people. The next episode won't be quite so complicated, thankfully, so tune in for that over the next, couple of weeks or so. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you haven't already for more Doctor Who goodness on this channel. I hope to see you in the next video, and bye for now.